the game. You don't play to just play. Come after me! I'm a man! I'm for you! Can't wait! Let's go!
Good morning. It is Coffee and Sports. It is the morning show here on Sports Empire Network. Thank you for making us part of your morning routine, whether you're doing it on YouTube or Facebook Live, or you're doing it on Roku TV, because you're, as you should be, hanging out and being a part of Northeast Streaming Sports Productions and everything they have going on over there. Am I wrong, Mo? It's the place to be.
It is the place to be. If you're not there, you are in the wrong.
Mo, we got pre-Thanksgiving happening today, sir.
I love it. Thanksgiving Eve. Let's go.
Thanksgiving Eve. I want to start off this morning. I actually saw this a couple of days ago. I never got a chance to talk to you about it. There was this little this groundswell, if you will. This happened prior to Monday Night Football, but I feel like we can put it more into context now. Since they've played, I believe they've played the same amount of games, or maybe Josh Allen's played one more. I'll pull up the stats in a second here. But there was a ground well of support for Josh Allen in the argument of this. And the argument is that we, as fans, tend to give Josh Allen more grief than we give Patrick Mahomes when they basically are having the same type of season. So I said, well, let's see. First of all, let's see if that's true. We'll start there and we'll move on accordingly. So if you look at the season that they are having this year in 10 games, Patrick Mahomes is 7-3. He is completing 67% of his passes. He has 19 touchdowns and he has 9 interceptions through the air. If you look at Josh Allen, he's played one extra game. So he has 11 games played. He's 6-5. He has 22 touchdown passes. So he's a few ahead of Mahomes. And he has 12 interceptions. So he's also a few ahead of Mahomes there with one more game played. Mo, for me, the conversation is very simple. When you win championships, I give you more slack. Because you've proven to me that regardless of how you play, and Mahomes has had his ups and downs. I mean, for a couple years in a row there, he went through 2 or 3 game slumps where he played really bad football. And it was acknowledged by him and Andy Reid, and they had to kind of take him back to basics and, get him out of doing some things that he was doing in college. And he won championships those years, Mo, or he got 2 championship games those years. So for me, yeah, sure, I'll acknowledge that maybe as a media, we're a little harder on Josh Allen, but isn't that what happens when you're elevated to Super Bowl status and you don't actually accomplish anything? Isn't the fall from grace going to be a little bit harder than the fall is going to be of someone who's winning championships and getting to consecutive AFC championship games? And while they're doing it, sometimes they play sloppy football. I mean, for me, it's earned. Once you start winning rings, I'm going to let you play sloppy a little bit because you're still winning. Oh, and by the way, he has a better record this year than Josh Allen. So I don't know without a number one receiver. So I don't know what you want.
And look, you bring up a great point. Patrick Mahomes has played in 3 Super Bowls. He's won 2 of those. We kind of defer to somebody who's accomplished the biggest thing you can accomplish in your sport. Like Patrick Mahomes has lived up to the hype. You reach a point where people go, this is a Super Bowl caliber team. And then there's these high expectations. To achieve those expectations, that's one thing. To always have potential next to your name like Josh Allen does, that's another thing. And now we're looking, I don't know if the Chiefs are going to win it all this year or not, but what I do know is I'm looking at the Bills and they look closer to the end of their run without winning anything. And so, yeah, you can point to numbers and say they're having the same season, but they're not having the same career. They're not. And like you said, the numbers show you one thing. I also know that Patrick Mahomes has a better record we still look at the Chiefs, even though they just lost to the Eagles, we still see them as a legit Super Bowl contender. And we look at the Bills and we still think they're more chaotic. Their future is more up in the air. That has a lot to do with who is your quarterback. That has a lot to do with the difference between potential and actually reaching that potential. I don't think they're the same guy at all. You can show me numbers, but I know what I've seen. Josh Allen has yet to play in a Super Bowl, and I don't know if he's going to play in one anytime soon.
And Mo, I would even take it a step further, and I would say, look at the narrative of the AFC for the past 4 years, because the narrative hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is the names. So you look at 3 or 4 years ago, who was the guy who was going to go up against Mahomes and beat him? Oh, it was Josh Allen. Then you look at 2 or 3 years ago, and who was it was Joe Burrow. And now you're looking at this year, and you're like, oh, it's going to be Lamar Jackson.
Right.
What's the constant? The constant is Patrick Mahomes. The constant in the narrative is who is going to compete with Patrick Mahomes. The only thing that's changing is the name on the other side, because the other side has proven either they can't do it or they don't have the ability to do it currently, i.e. Joe Burrow and injury. So for a couple years, it was Josh Allen. He was the anointed number 2 in the AFC. And what happened? He stopped getting to the games against Patrick Mahomes. You can't be the number 2 that could potentially take down Mahomes if you're not even playing him in the AFC Championship game. So Burrow was anointed. Well, it's not going to be Burrow this year because Burrow is injured. So who is it going to be? Clearly, we don't think it's going to be Josh Allen because we're not having that conversation anymore. Why? Because Allen and the Bills have proven, as of right now, and again, their ceiling is still there, but the expectation is not. So they've proven that they don't belong in that conversation right now. Who is in that conversation right now? The Ravens are in that conversation right now. The Dolphins are in that conversation right now. Hell, some people are putting CJ Stroud, and I don't think he should be, but they're putting him in that conversation right now. And if they're all in that conversation and Josh Allen isn't, that has a lot more, in my opinion, to do with Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills than it does anything else.
And we're not saying that Josh Allen isn't a top quarterback. We're not saying that he's not one of the elite talents. But when you're trying to compare him, it's sort of like if we go back even further, when Tom Brady pretty much controlled the AFC, he sat there and he was what you had to run through. You had to the road to the Super Bowl. You had to go through Tom Brady, and the narrative was it was a different quarterback basically every year that was going to knock off Tom Brady. And 9 times out of 10, you didn't knock off Tom Brady. I don't want to rain on Josh Allen because I do believe he's a talented guy that will have a level of success. I don't know if it's going to end up being Super Bowl success. Like, will he get to one Super Bowl? Will he be a Matt Ryan? Will he have up all the numbers and the accolades, maybe get to one Super Bowl? Or will he be one of those guys that never gets to the Super Bowl? The question is up in the air, but right now, looking at the scope of the NFL, the reason why we're not talking about Josh Allen and the Bills is because, like you said, we've moved on. We're looking at Lamar. Some people are looking at Trevor Lawrence more than they're looking at Josh Allen. And that's not all on Josh Allen, but he is the quarterback. And we start off with QB1 every time we make those comparisons.
The Geek Gauntlet podcast makes a valid point. They said that Allen lost his best coach and that derailed him, so to speak. And here's what I'm going to say here. And I don't do this often, but I'm actually going to take a shot at my quarterback when I say this because I think it's fair. If you look at Tua and you look at what Tua accomplished his first couple of years in the league with a defensive head coach in a system that wasn't necessarily designed to his strengths, he was an average at best quarterback. I think that's a fair statement. I have no issue saying that. When you give him an offensive head coach that builds a system specifically around what he is good at and tries to accentuate his strengths, he is a top 10 quarterback in this league, and the stats prove that. My point is, Tua, just based on sheer athletic ability and talent at the quarterback position, is not someone who was going to overcome a system and a coach that wasn't there to be around him. It is what it is. We saw it. Tua could not overcome a defensive head coach. Tua could not overcome a generic offense that wasn't designed specifically for him. Patrick Mahomes can. You put Patrick Mahomes in any offense, he's going to find a way to make it successful because he is an elite quarterback. You put Jalen Hurts in any sort of a system, given the athletic tools and the ability he has at the quarterback position, he's going to overcome a lot of shortcomings of what you put around him. It doesn't mean that Tua isn't a good quarterback. It just means Tua is a step below those other guys. And I think that's a fair thing to say. For a while now, I think we were putting Josh Allen in the category of Patrick Mahomes, saying because he can be Superman and he can put a team on his back, he can do those kind of things. I think he's proven without Brian Daboll, he doesn't belong in that category. And that's not a bad thing, Mo. That isn't necessarily a knock on Josh Allen. It's just saying that he needs a team around him. He needs an offense to be built around his strengths, which, by the way, a lot of quarterbacks, most quarterbacks in the NFL require that.
Agreed.
And that's not a bad thing.
Look who you're talking to. I'm a Niners fan. Look who you're talking to.
Exactly. And I think people need to stop looking at Josh Allen and thinking he is the few of the few, like a Patrick Mahomes, that doesn't need things to go right all the time, because he kind of does. Because when things don't go right, we see who Josh Allen is. And who has turned the ball over the most times at the quarterback position since he entered the league? Oh, it's Josh Allen. And he doesn't just do it through the air. He fumbles the ball a lot too. So those numbers don't lie. And it's not a situation where Buffalo's had terrible offensive lines and he's just taking a beating back there. That's not the case. Josh is just a little loose with the football when he has the opportunity to play loose. And yeah, it's great at times. And at times it's a turnover. So I think what Josh Allen is actually proving is that he's more in the he needs more structure around him to be great category.
That's a great word, structure. I look at Josh Allen and I see a bigger, more athletic Brett Favre. That an elite talent, but I like what you said. He needs more structure. He's the kind of guy that needs a system. He needs to be reined in a little bit, right? We can agree on that, reined in a little bit. And to the Geek Gauntlet's point, yes, he lost his best coach. And you're right. There are a lot of quarterbacks that need a system that fits their skill set. And if you have a defensive-minded coach, which, by the way, the NFL genius, Gene has told us several times, and I'm with him, in this era, if you've got a defensive-minded coach and that coach is kind of running the offense too, to a degree, defensive-minded coaches are becoming dinosaurs, right? They have to adjust to where the game is now. And I just think if you're going to have a defensive-minded coach, you have to be able to release, I guess, some of that power and let your OC do what he does and let him literally run his offense, scheme it the way he wants to scheme it, and you'll have more success. I think when we look at what Belichick's done recently and a few others, they struggle with sharing that power. And ultimately that hurts the team. Look at Josh Allen. I think you hit it on the head. He needs structure, period.
And we're going to talk a little more later in the show with our NFL genius about defensive head coaches and the impact it's having on their quarterbacks. But Mo, right now we're going to take a quick break. When we come back from our break, we're going to have Will on the show. Will's going to talk a little NBA with us. We're about 15 games in. We're going to take a look at where teams stand right now. And I have an interesting LeBron James story that I would love to get you and Will's opinions on. That's going to happen right after the break. Don't go anywhere. It's Coffee and Sports. It's the morning show here on Sports Empire Network.
Hey, y'all, I'm Key.
And I'm Jory, and tune in to Hoop Dreams and Touchdown Queens every Saturday at 5 p.m. over on Sports Empire Network.
And don't forget, also watch us on Roku TV at Northeast Streaming Productions. So tune in.
I don't know why, but whenever I hear the ladies' music, I think of arcade games. I don't know why.
I like that a lot.
It's kind of got that kind of thing to it, right?
It does have that vibe. We are joined now by William this morning. Will, how are you doing, sir?
How you guys doing? Thank you for having me this morning. You guys doing all right?
Well, doing well.
Hey,
Good,
we're
good,
pre-Thanksgiving. We're excited for some meals coming up later this week. JG was on yesterday talking about his oyster stuffing that he was excited for. So I'm telling you, big things are happening. But Will, what I want to talk to you about first is a story came out. This actually came out last week, but I specifically saved it. I want to talk to you about it. It came from Gilbert Arenas. Which we all got our opinions on Gilbert. But Gilbert Arenas was, I don't know if it was his podcast or he was a guest on someone else's podcast, but he was talking about how, back, in the mid 2000s, Miami wasn't actually LeBron's first choice. The New York Knicks were actually LeBron's first choice as far as who he wanted to go to. If you remember, he had the meeting with the Knicks. The meeting went terrible. Dolan the meeting. LeBron and his people left the meeting basically saying there's no way in hell I am playing for that man in that organization. But that doesn't change the fact that before that meeting took place, that is where LeBron initially had wanted to go, which makes sense for his brand and the city. And you see what he's doing in LA with all his other stuff outside of basketball. New York probably would have been a very similar vibe for him. So, Will, I'm asking you to step back into kind of the time machine here and predict a future that never took place. But what do you think it would have done for the New York Knicks organization had LeBron gone there and the pieces that were rumored to go there ended up being there with him? So they got Melo not that soon after LeBron, so they probably still would have made. Let's assume they still make that move, and Melo's playing with LeBron after he leaves Denver. We'll start here. Do you think the Knicks win a championship with LeBron had he gone there?
With those rumored pieces, yes.
Yes.
But I still think, though, Dolan would have looked at it as more of a marketing situation than he would have a championship situation. Yeah, he would have got those pieces because LeBron would have wanted those pieces. But you also have to look at a couple of other things. Who would have been that head coach there at that point? Because there's a point where you can win championship just off talent, and there's a point you can win a championship just off coaching. So I think they still win a championship. I still think everything happens to Bron. With perhaps not that Miami Dallas loss. I don't think that would have happened, of course, but I think he still wins championships and still has the same greatness as he does today. But I just think Dolan would have played it a completely different situation. He would have played it toward more marketing, which would have kind of made, quote unquote, Stephen A. Smith happy, because LeBron would have been that star that they hadn't had since Willis Reed and Patrick Ewing. So I still think that they would have been a champion. It would have been interesting to see, like Gene, it would have been interesting to see what would have happened with some of those older Knicks players, what they would have thought. But I still think that LeBron and the Knicks would have won titles, because, like I said, you can win a championship just off sheer talent.
I think he would have won a talent. I think he would have won a title. I don't know if he would have had the success overall that he had in Miami, but I think
just one, Mo, just one.
Right, but here's the thing: one title in New York. When you think about the last time they won was, I think, the early 70s. That one time,
something like
right? That one title's like worth two.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. That's how big a deal it would have been, and I think LeBron's brand was already cemented, but if he wins a title in New York, it would have elevated him even more so. But I think they win one for sure. I don't know about two, because remember, that would have been a different NBA altogether. Who's to say that Pat Riley doesn't go out and get Wade another sidekick, and he's competing directly against Wade? That would have been different.
Right. It definitely would have been a domino effect with other teams. I like what Gene said too. He said LeBron would have been out of there within 2 years. he might be right about that.
I would tell you the upside of New York is amazing. But if you want to talk about scrutiny, the media scrutiny in New York when things are bad. LeBron's a great player, but he's a sensitive guy. That New York media, when things are not right, it would have frustrated him. He would have bounced. He would have won that title. He would have won that title, but he would have bounced.
He would have bounced big time. But I still think everything happens to him. He gets that one in New York. Part of the other question is, part of that question rather, would he had gone back to Cleveland? Ugh. You're assuming that Cleveland would have picked up Kyrie. Yeah, I could see him go back to Cleveland from that because the way the media would have treated him would have been 10 times worse than what he's going through now.
Oh,
so
easily.
I think he would have went back to Cleveland just to kind of like duck for cover, so to speak, kind of get away from that, trying to get his mind back to where he can just focus on basketball and not have to worry about being scrutinized as much.
And then we're going to take it one step further. And obviously, there's no way of knowing this. But I think everything we've said so far is logical and it makes sense. The microscope is going to be brighter in New York. He's going to face more scrutiny in New York than he faced in Miami. And making that move back home, assuming the team looked the same, and we'll just say that it did, to potentially win a championship with Cleveland probably would have been that much more enticing.
Yep.
But after that, does he still have a need to even go to the Lakers? Because he already played in the big market with the big brand. He got New York a championship.
That's a great point.
Now if you
point.
look at it, maybe he never becomes a Laker,
right?
Because he doesn't need to at that point. He already did all that in New York.
Right.
So maybe he doesn't become a Laker at that point, Will.
Alternative timeline, he stays in Cleveland and finishes his career there in that alternative timeline, which would have been a sort of kind of speak happy ending, particularly if he still wins that championship with the Cavs. So yeah, I think he goes home, and I don't think he will either become a Laker. Like you said, there's no need to.
You know what's crazy? If that scenario had played out the way we talked about, he would have won less championships, but I feel like he would have been elevated more.
Me too.
The championship in New York would have elevated. It's been so long since they won.
And then he would have went back home.
Right. And he goes back to Cleveland where they never win, and he would have won that championship. Those two championships would have felt like he won 5 championships. That's
Then he stays in Cleveland where his home is and where it's the feel-good story. And who knows? Because if you look at what the East not now, obviously the East is more competitive now. But during that time, the East wasn't the most competitive. So who knows if he couldn't get another championship out of Cleveland after he would have potentially got the one when he returned. Now you're looking at him returning home and getting multiple championships out of Cleveland, which again feeds that kind of feel-good story.
Jay brought up another good point too. That Pat Riley taught the man how to win. That's a good point. That's a good point. Plus, he never hooks up with Dwayne Wade.
Correct.
So that's another point to that equation. Does he still end up being the frozen one like he did in that playoff series in Dallas?
Who knows?
Who knows?
I don't know. But I do agree that Pat Riley, that culture taught him how to win. New York would have been different because they weren't a winning culture.
Nope.
But I do think he would have gotten other guys to join him. I do believe he would have won at least a title in New York. Like his career, his overall career wouldn't change. The numbers would be there. The accolades would be there. He might not have as many titles, but in some ways he would stand taller, in my opinion.
And real quick, too, since we're talking about LeBron, I do want to shout him out. Became the first player to score 39,000 last night. So congrats to you, LeBron.
Congrats.
I still think he's the second best. I still get Michael Jordan's the first, but longevity is the key here, and LeBron has played it perfectly. So
it's not just longevity, though. Will, he's playing at an all-time high level. Like a lot of guys have played long and been pretty good. He's playing long, and in my opinion, right now today, he's an MVP candidate.
And look at his minutes. Look at his minutes. The man is not missing any. They tried to dial this man.
They tried.
That's right.
You can't.
He is one of one. He's one of one.
We're about 15, 16 games into the season. Me and Mo have talked about before. You need about 25, 30 before we really kind of figure out where we are. So we're about halfway there. We're about halfway to getting a really good picture of what teams are. So with that in mind, I wanted to kind of take a look at where things stand right now. If you look at the East, It's the three teams that were predicted going in. The Celtics, the Bucks, and the 76ers are your top three teams in the East right now. That's what the preseason predictions were. Nothing is really astray there. But Will, I wanted to get your opinion on the next three: the Heat, the Magic, the Pacers. What do you think of those three coming out of the gate pretty strong to open up the season? And of those three, which one do you kind of see having the biggest potential to fall off as the season wears on?
I'm loving what Orlando and Indiana are doing right now. They're playing very, very well. Halliburton's Orlando's playing well with Cole Anthony. But the one that I look to fall off would be the Orlando Magic. That's the one that I would look to fall off. They're a really young team right now. They don't necessarily know how to win. So if there was a team to fall off, I think it would be the Orlando Magic. Honorable mention would be the Pacers, of course. The Heat are going to be steady all year long. But it would be Orlando and Indiana, I think, would be the two that will be dropping off.
I think the Pacers they're the Eastern Conference version of the Sacramento Kings. It's how they play.
That's a good point. It's
how they play. They are going to score on you. They're going to give up a lot of points, but their idea is we're going to outscore you in the end, and that's how they play. I don't think they're going to fall off in terms of if they're going to be a playoff team. The team that's the most compelling is Orlando because it's not a star-studded team.
Nope.
And even though Paolo Banchero is a talented guy,
he's playing well too.
He hasn't really established himself as the guy. Not yet. He's talented and he's their leading scorer. What impresses me about Orlando guys is they're winning with defense. They are locking teams down. They're playing defense like we're in the beginning of the playoffs, and I just want to know if they can sustain that kind of effort throughout the regular season.
Nice. I'm loving Cole Anthony too. He came off the bench last night with 18. He's playing really well off the bench for them. I'm loving what he's doing. Real quick too, another development happened last night. Don't know if you guys caught it. Kevin Durant is now the 11th leading scorer on a career scoring list. So congrats to Kevin Durant. Congrats to KD. I just think KD need a haircut and gain. I just think he need a haircut and gain some weight. But that's it.
Does he need a haircut or a better brush?
Probably. Probably. Maybe a better brush.
Maybe something with some bristles in it. You know what I mean? Really get at the.
But you can't take talent away from that man. And with all these injuries that Phoenix is going through right now, I'm still worried about Bradley Beal. But as many injuries as that team's going right now, he's definitely trying to hold it down for the Suns on his own.
Bill,
if you look at
no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, Mo, you go. You got this.
No, real quick. What are your concerns about your Chicago Bulls? Because there's so many rumors out there about one of your stars, Zach LaVine. I know you're already shaking your head, Will, and my guess is you're on board with moving Zach LaVine. My guess is you're on board with moving all those guys.
I'm on board with moving Zach because of the culture, because of the atmosphere. That team is already going through enough disarray. You don't need any more distractions on that team. The one criticism I've always given Zach LaVine is consistency. You're somewhat getting it from him this year, but the way he stormed off the court the other night when they came back and beat Miami, that he showed his behind, so to speak, and I didn't appreciate that at all coming from a fan. So you move him, I think you move, but you got to make sure you get a good deal. You got to make sure you get a draft pick. You got to make sure you get a point guard. You got to do the right deal. And me and you commented the other day on a Facebook post that we saw that him going to the Lakers for that little trash deal that we saw with Ruchi Harmora and some draft. No, the Bulls don't need that trash. We don't need that. What we need, I think D'Angelo Russell was in that deal too. We don't need any of that. What we need a point guard.
As a Laker fan, you can have D'Lo. You can have him.
We don't want D'Lo. We don't need D'Lo. If we get D'Lo, he gonna be one season and he out. But I just think we need a consistent point guard play. And if you could get consistent point guard play for Zach LaVine, get you a couple of younger picks, get you some big men in there, get you a stretch four. Yeah, I've been more than happy to move Zach because again, you don't need that distraction on your sideline. You don't need that attitude from Zach. You need somebody who's gonna come in there and be a team player, play alongside DeMar DeRozan. Caruso's playing decent, so I have no problem moving Zach LaVine as long as we get the right compensation.
Looking at the Western Conference, Will, top 4 teams in the West right now: Timberwolves, Nuggets, Thunder, Mavericks.
That's weird.
We knew the Nuggets were going to be there. That was predicted going in. We also knew that the West was kind of up for grabs for the number 2 spot after the Nuggets because teams are dealing with injuries. So we knew that some teams are come out kind of slow because of injuries. And we knew that even if they're all healthy, we didn't really know who was going to be that team outside of Phoenix that was really going to step up and have a season to kind of compete with Denver. So when you look at the West standings, what do you think of the Timberwolves and the Mavericks coming out and playing as strong as they are to open the season? And do either of those teams have staying power to stay in that top 3 or 4 and potentially make a playoff run?
Dallas might. I don't trust what I'm seeing from Minnesota. I think Minnesota eventually, I think they'll still be a playoff team, but I think they fall out of first place in the Western Conference. I see them hitting a snag maybe a little before the All-Star break and they start slumping after. But I do see the Mavericks, again, offensively, they're great. One of the better offenses in the league. My issue is who they going to stop. And when it comes down to the playoffs, you got to stop somebody at some point. So I think that's my only issue with Dallas. I think teams, as the season gets later on, I think these teams will start rising to the top. I think you'll see Golden State get a little bit healthier. I think you see Clay kind of catch fire a little bit. I think he rebounds. That man's a champion. And as much as I say, yes, you can trade him, but I think he does come out of this slump. I think Phoenix will get healthy. I think they'll do their thing. The Lakers are playing well in the tournament right now. They're 4-0, so obviously they'll be a threat. But I do see OKC and Dallas making it to the playoffs and making some noise. I just think the Timberwolves fall off.
Really?
Yep.
I like the Timberwolves. I think that for the first time, everybody has a design role on that team. Like, there's no question that is Anthony Edwards' team, right?
Oh, yeah.
It is built around him, and I think he's elevating himself into the conversation with guys like Tatum, Embiid, and others, and they're doing great with situational basketball, right? When teams go small, you spread Gobert out, put him in space, and people eat them alive. When teams go small, they're taking him out, putting in Naz Reid, a bigger, more mobile big man who can play in space.
Somebody can come out of the perimeter.
Yes, and so they have more balance when it comes to situational basketball. So I don't know if they're going to stay in first place, but I think they're a very good team. I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon.
I just don't trust the fact that when the big moments happen against these more accomplished teams as we get later down the season, I just don't trust them to perform well in those particular instances. Sometimes the rubber meets the road, and they're not the youngest team out there, but they're still a young team. And I don't know if they would be able to hold up against that pressure when it's time to perform, particularly when you get to the when it gets down to playoff season. I don't know if they'll be able to do that, which is why I say I don't trust them. I think OKC will do well. I think the Dallas Mavericks will do well because, man, Shai Gilchrist is no joke. Shai is no joke. I'm loving what he's doing. Kyrie and Luka, they're gonna play well, obviously. And they have that experience in those clutch moments, particularly Kyrie. So I just don't trust Minnesota. Yeah, they're playing well. Switching the lineup depending on what they see from what the other reaction is great. As you said earlier, I just don't trust them overall in big moments.
Well, we appreciate having you on the show this morning. Before you get out of here, we got 30 more seconds. Favorite Thanksgiving side? What are you looking forward to tomorrow, sir?
Oh, macaroni and cheese, bro.
Okay.
Whoa.
Macaroni and cheese.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, that homemade macaroni and cheese, right?
Homemade macaroni and cheese, not that processed stuff. That homemade macaroni and cheese. We can't do it no craft. We can't do it no craft of Velveeta up in here. It's got to be homemade.
Will, always a pleasure. We'll see you next week, sir.
Thank you. You guys have a great morning. Thank you.
All right, Mo, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to have the NFL Genius joining us. We got a lot of NFL stuff to talk about as we jump into Week 12, which starts tomorrow. It continues into Friday, and then we spill into the rest of the lineup happening on Sunday. We got Gene joining us right after the break. Don't go anywhere. It's Coffee and Sports. It's the morning show here on Sports Empire Network.
What's up, everybody? It's Cottrell Simpson with Wire to Wire Sports Podcast, where we're going to cover all things breaking news, sports related. We're going to preview games, and we're also going to give you our reaction to games that have happened before. You can catch us on Wednesdays from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And if you miss us there, no worries. You can also catch us on Roku with Northeast Streaming Sports Productions from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m.
Hey, and listen, if you're not into all sports and just NFL, we have Sideline to Sideline. That's on Thursday nights from 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 8 p.m. We'll break down the NFL week, the Thursday night game, and we'll preview all NFL action.
And if you're like me and college football is your fix, tune in every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. for Coast to Coast College Football pregame show. We'll review the previous week's action, the day's biggest games. We'll give you our pick'ems, and we'll even give you some teams that are on upset alert.
And if you don't catch us live, you can download us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to your podcast. We do also have a YouTube station, Wire to Wire Sports Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
Welcome back. It is Coffee and Sports. It is the morning show here on Sports Empire Network, and we are joined now by the NFL genius himself from Wire to Wire, Gene. How are you this morning, sir?
Good, Gene.
Pretty good. What's happening? How y'all feeling tonight?
Hey, we're feeling good, Gene. Let's start with this. Pittsburgh Steelers did something yesterday they haven't done since the 1940s or something along those lines, and that is they have fired a coach mid-season. The last time they did that is when their half coach, half owner fired himself. So this is something that doesn't happen a lot in Pittsburgh. But, Gene, I would argue this is just part one of the process, because is Kenny Pickett really the long-term answer in Pittsburgh?
We don't know. And I think that offensive coordinators, like my gut tells me no, I don't think he is. I didn't think he was when he got drafted. But we don't know, right? Like, we don't know because we haven't seen him in a system that was structured for him. Matt Canada's done a terrible job in Pittsburgh. No players are schematically schemed open. There's nothing creative about his playbook. There's nothing where you look at it and you're like, wow, that was really interesting how that design worked. Scheme that guy wide open. I don't see Kenny Pickett missing wide open throws across the field. What I do see is him throwing contested passes to George Pickens, constantly on the move, constantly looking for a player that's open. Their offense looks terrible, and when they get into a fourth quarter style offense, Kenny Pickett's been great. He's had over 100 quarterback rating in the fourth quarter. Now, the other three quarters, 70s. It's terrible. So I don't know yet. I'm not ready to write the book on Kenny Pickett until I see him with an offensive coordinator that can scheme up plays open for him.
What does the book say for the Steelers going forward? They're currently 6-4. They're third in their division. They're in the thick of the playoff race. But now you're making a change at OC mid-season. The defense is what the defense is. We have no concerns over there. But this could go two ways. It could be a bump, and we could see a little more production out of the offensive side, which is what they need. Or it could be a bump down, and you could see the offense take a step back, which is not going to help them come playoff time or to get them into the playoffs. So is this a bump in the right direction? You would assume it is. You would assume that Tomlin looked at this and said, hey, I think this can be a bump in the right direction. But we don't know. We can't predict the future as far as, whether it is or it isn't, Gene. So what do you see the next 4 or 5 games being for the Steelers, why they try to find whatever they're trying to find on offense?
Well, I agree with almost everything that you said. I don't think they can be a bump down. They could stay exactly where they're at, and that to me might be a bump down, right? Like, they don't improve by adding an offensive coordinator, but I don't think they can get worse. Like, what's worse, Zach Wilson? Like, I don't think Kenny Pickett will ever be that. So I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers, going into the colder months of the year, November and December, you're going to get still some more divisional matchups for them. And I think that you're going to see a lot of black and blue football. You're going to see more of the same, hopefully a little bit more creativity. Did they name? I don't think they named an offense coordinator yet. They were interviewing Hugh Jackson earlier in the week. They don't have an offense coordinator right now. They're not going to redo their whole playbook. It's just how they're going to call plays. So I don't think you'll see a huge bump up, but I think this week particularly, you'll see a spark. A lot of guys in that locker room don't like Matt Canada. They didn't like him. And that goes from Boswell to Pickett to Pickens to Deontay Johnson. A lot of them don't like Matt Canada. So you might see them playing with an extra pep in their step, a little extra flavor this week. But I don't think there'll be a huge jump forward. I think they're a fringe wild card team at best. The Ravens have basically wrapped up that division, in my opinion, with Joe Burrow's injury and Deshaun Watson's injury, because both those teams are competitive. I think the Steelers finished 9-8 or 10-7, and you get more of the same.
Could you argue that it's basically what's happening in Buffalo? Buffalo's not changing their playbook. They're just changing the plays that are being called to plays that are more beneficial to Josh Allen, and not necessarily putting Josh Allen in situations that maybe Ken Dorsey was putting him in. And you saw that last week, right? You saw more short passing from Allen. You saw more design plays where receivers are coming out of the backfield and getting open and being allowed to make plays on their own, as opposed to Allen forcing the ball down the field. Could that kind of be what we see in Pittsburgh? Not necessarily new plays, same plays they already knew, that maybe they just weren't being called as much.
I mean, yeah, you could see that. You mentioned the thing with Josh Allen. I honestly think that he didn't even look that great this week, if I'm being honest with you.
I agree.
There's a lot of plays that were made by the receivers and also a lot of short fields because Zach Wilson is pathetic. I don't think that was a Buffalo Bills. Like, I listened to your show earlier in the week where you were talking about Josh Allen yelling.
He said he's back. I'm effing back.
Out of what? It was a freaking 6-7 yard pass that went 70 yards. And you think you did that? Like, that's not what happened. I don't think Ken Dorsey was the problem in Buffalo. I think Josh Allen's own head is the problem. And Chris, if you don't mind, you brought something up earlier in the show, and I kind of want to give a counterpoint to it, right? Where you were talking about Patrick Mahomes and is he not getting the same criticism of Josh Allen? Let me ask you a question real quick. If Patrick Mahomes is one, what, in your opinion or Mo's opinion, next 4 best quarterbacks in football?
Go ahead, Mo.
Yeah.
The next 4 best. Well,
Yeah.
I would have Burrow.
Burrow?
Burrow would be one of my guys. I know people don't see it this way, but I also think Jalen Hurts would be one of my guys. I'm really big on Jalen Hurts, and maybe Trevor Lawrence.
Okay.
I mean, most people will go Herbert, but I would maybe Trevor Lawrence.
Okay, so when you look at those players, Josh Allen is another one you have to put in that conversation. Lamar Jackson.
Sure.
I want you to take a second back, right? Jamar Chase, you said Joe Burrow. Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen.
Right.
Keenan Allen, Calvin Ridley for Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence. A.J. Brown for Jalen Hurts. Lamar Jackson has 4 first-round picks at the wide receiver position. 4. Patrick Mahomes has nothing. He has Travis Kelce. It's not the same.
An aging Travis Kelce.
Correct. Definitely. Definitely.
Oh no, we're in total agreement. I thought maybe it didn't sound like it when we were talking about it earlier, but what I was saying was, like, look what he's doing with what he has, right? And look what you're doing with what you have. Like, you have a legit number 1 receiver. Like Diggs, for whatever you think of him, he's a dog. He's that guy. And Patrick Mahomes, their guy or that dog, he plays in Miami now. And they don't have him no more, and he's trying to get by with a bunch of number 2s or number 3s. So yeah, I don't think it's the same. But I thought it was hilarious, and we talked about it when Josh Allen was like, "I'm back, I'm back." That blew my mind because that wide receiver did everything on that play, and he's back.
I love that, by the way.
Speaking of Josh Allen, obviously he plays Philadelphia. Josh, the Bills' schedule. This is, I mean, I know the Eagles are in the midst of their big stretch right now. They had a 6 or 7 game stretch that was absolutely ridiculous this season, and they're handling it. And they have a few more games on the other side of that, Gene, that they need to get through. But if you look at Buffalo, their season really is predicated on their next 4 games. The next 4 weeks. They go Philly, bye week, Kansas City, Dallas. If they go 1-2, which it's very possible they go 0-3 in that stretch, but even if they go 1-2 in that stretch, I mean, during that same time, Miami plays the Jets, the Commanders, the Titans, and the Jets. I mean, they need to keep pace with Miami in the division. They need to keep pace with the rest of the AFC that isn't playing at nearly as hard of a schedule as they're playing. What do you honestly expect from Buffalo going into this game with Philly? We see how Philly's playing. We see how it's working on both sides of the ball in Philly. And you see, hey, Josh Allen's effing back. So if Buffalo fans are probably thinking they're going to roll into this Philly game and they're going to do something. Gene, I think they're going to get punched in the face. And I think it's going to happen pretty early in this game. I don't know how competitive the Philly game is going to be, because if Buffalo is coming in there thinking they're back, I think Philly's going to prove that wrong pretty early on.
I mean, I think Philadelphia matches up really well versus Buffalo with Matt Milano out and no Tre'Davious White. They really don't have a secondary. And the big thing that they kind of hang their hat on is their defensive line is incredible, right? With Ed Oliver, you got Von Miller, you got Gregory Rousseau. You got a lot of guys that can get after the quarterback. Well, Philadelphia can match that. So I don't think that going into this football game, Buffalo's strengths are where the Eagles' weaknesses are. So I agree with you. However, I don't think they're going to keep pace with Miami. I don't think that's even a question, right? If I'm Buffalo, like, I'm not saying this to my players, but I'm like, we got to keep pace with Pittsburgh. We got to keep pace with Cleveland. We got to keep pace with the Raiders, because that's who you're vying, the Houston Texans, that's who you're vying for. They're a wild card team at best. Now, when the season started, obviously you can't project all these injuries. I had Buffalo on the outside looking in on the playoffs. I seen this coming a mile away. When Dable left there last year and they didn't replace him and they just promoted Ken Dorsey, and I don't think Ken Dorsey is the problem, but I think Dable had the clout in that locker room to really get Josh Allen to not throw the ball to the other team and not try to be a hero. I think you'll see Buffalo be fine. I think they'll end up making the playoffs as a 6 or 7 seed. And if I'm being completely honest with you, I think they'll end up winning they'll go 1-2 in those next 3, but they could win out after that, right? They don't have the toughest schedule after that.
Yep.
So with that, I think that they can make the playoffs at 9-8 or 10-7, and I don't think that will be too big of an issue.
Before we get into our conversation about defensive head coaches, Gene, I want to real quick bring up something about your Eagles. This hit social media yesterday, and obviously, look at the context of where it came from. It came from Cowboy fans. That was the initial push on it. So understand that, and I take that into context. But what happened was it was just clips after the game. Big win for the Eagles, right? Looking forward to this win. Super Bowl rematch. A lot of emotions there. After the game, you had Nick Sirianni going into the tunnel. He was kind of yelling at I'm sure they were yelling at him too. Don't get me wrong. We all know how fans can be. So I'm sure they were saying crap to him. He was saying crap back. You had Slay, who was kind of posturing in front of the Kansas City fans. There were some hand gestures. He was cursing at them. I'm sure they were cursing at him. My whole takeaway on this is, you won. You have every right to celebrate. You do your thing. But the next one, if there is a next one, and I think the Eagles are going to be there. I don't know if the Chiefs are going to be there, but I think the Eagles are going to be there. That's the one that matters. So for me, celebrate it. You won the game. That's great. You did lose the Super Bowl previously to them. Obviously, that's the one you want. You want the Super Bowl. So celebrate it, take it for what it is, and then let's move on. And I think the Eagles are done. I don't think they're going to be talking about it today. They've moved on. So I guess this is more to Eagles fan than it is to the Eagles players. Great game, great victory. Do a Bill Belichick and move on, because if you meet them again and you lose, this didn't matter.
Chris, the fun thing about what you said was the way Nick Sirianni and Slay acted after the game. I think that this is a constant thing with Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni is, you ever meet the guy, and we've all played like some type of sports or recreational sports or whatever, that is the worst person ever on the field. And then you meet him outside the locker room or off the field and like, wow, that guy's a really good guy. Just his emotions get the best of him when he's on the field. That's who Nick Sirianni is. He's a problem when he's on the field. He's emotional. You've seen it with the tears on the Super Bowl, the trash talk. This is not the first time he's done this, Chris. It's just because it was on Monday Night Football, because there was 30 million people watching.
Right.
That's why you've seen this. But this is not the first time Sirianni's done this. Sirianni is a blowhard. I don't know how to explain it the right way. He's a guy that gets very, very hyped during the games and emotional. And then even in the post-game presser, he was just cool, calm, and collected. He embraces the city of Philadelphia, that tough, mentality that like we're going to beat you up and we're going to tell you about it. I think that he needs to take a little bit of a chill pill, like have somebody in his ear being like, dude, Nick, just let's not do that. Like, let's not, because there's now Slay, on the other hand, Slay's always been that way.
Right.
Slay is the talker. That's what corners and wide receivers are.
Yep.
I think for Philadelphia, this game was a little bit more emotional because although they handled it like professionals after losing the Super Bowl, like Bradbury saying, I did hold, and them not blaming the field, we both play on the field. I'm telling you right now, they knew for months, like CJ Gardner-Johnson, as soon as he left the team, let off on if we played them on a regular field and we weren't slipping, our defensive line was our biggest thing. We couldn't get after the quarterback because they were slipping. They said if we played them on a neutral field, we would beat them. And I think that they needed to prove that more to themselves. And when you mentioned that last thing about seeing them again in the Super Bowl, I'll give you my 2 cents here. Beating a team in their house off a bye week with Andy Reid 21-3 off a bye gives them such a more emotional advantage if they do play them again on a neutral field. I think that it's kind of emotional, and it's not just another game like Nick Sirianni likes to say in his press conferences.
Let's take a look real quick, Gene. I want to talk a little bit about defensive head coaches. We know the narrative in the NFL, and the narrative is if you don't have an offensive-minded head coach, you're putting your team behind the 8 ball. And sometimes these narratives kind of take on a life of their own, and they're not necessarily fruitful across the board. But when you start to look at it and you start to really break it down, I mean, you got the Jets with Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson definitely isn't getting better. You have the Patriots with Bill Belichick. Mac Jones definitely isn't getting better. You have the Chargers with Staley. That's a dumpster fire over there completely. You have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have had success, but you can look at Kenny Pickett and say, I don't know. And we said that earlier. We don't know. Is he going up a little bit? Sometimes. Is he dropping back down a little bit? Sometimes. So I don't know if the Kenny Pickett progression is where you think it should be. The Texans might be the biggest outlier, and you can look at that, and we'll know in a few years if CJ Stroud, if this is really him, if this is where his level of play stays. You could definitely look at him as saying he's someone who can kind of rise above those situations if this talent really is what he is. But Gene, is it fair? That was just what I looked at in the AFC. Those aren't great situations with defensive head coaches, and yes, some of the quarterbacks aren't great, but some of the quarterbacks are above average, and they're not getting it done.
So it's not about the head coach that's the problem. I've mentioned this before. What the problem is, you can't keep good offense coordinators when you're a defensive head coach. That's their issue. It's not about I don't care if the head coach is defensive, offensive. DeMeco Ryans has proven to you that a defensive head coach can develop a young rookie quarterback. But guess what? I guarantee you the offensive coordinator for Houston Texans is going to get job interviews. It looks like that across. Look at Brian Daboll, Sean McDermott, defensive head coach. Brian Daboll, Josh Allen had his best season ever, head coach. You can look at some of these situations, but it's not technically the head coach. It's the fact that they can't keep a good offensive coordinator. Now, some of the situations, it's more a philosophy, right? Like the worst coach in all football, Matt Eberflus. Like, I think he's awful. Defensive-minded head coach, never built his team's offense around Justin Fields. I think that's a problem. So I think that defensive-minded head coaches aren't the issue. The only issue with it is they can't keep good offensive coordinators because they don't grow on trees. A good offensive coordinator will eventually be a head coach.
All right, gentlemen, we got 5 minutes left. Let's make our Thanksgiving Turkey Day picks. Mo, I'm going to start with you. We got the Packers going to the Lions. Packers are playing better. Jordan Love is playing a little better over the last couple of weeks. If they pull out this game, they keep their playoff hopes alive. They be 5-6. The Lions are a pretty big favorite here. Who you like, Packers or Lions?
I'm going to go with the Lions. Even though I understand the Packers are playing better, I'm going to roll with Campbell and Goff. I think the Lions win.
Gene, who you got?
Lions by 1 million. I don't think this game is close. I think Dan Campbell is going to have those guys feasting, showing them all the video footage of them playing on previous Thanksgiving and losing.
Oh, I
showing
love
how
that.
many times Aaron Rodgers has destroyed them. This
Oh,
is
I
a
love
big
that.
rival. I think that they absolutely dominate them.
I mean, we just saw them beat a bad team where they played terrible. They're not going to play terrible again this week. He's not going to have 3 interceptions. They're not going to have 4 or 5 turnovers on offense. And even doing that, they still won last week against a bad team. Packers are a little bit better than Chicago, but not by much.
Look for a big game of Jamison Williams. I
Yeah.
think he's starting to break out. I think Jamison Williams has 2 catches, that big catches, maybe 2 touchdowns.
Another game, which again, sucks because the Thanksgiving matchups aren't that great early. Commanders and Cowboys. Cowboys are an 11-point favorite. Gene, Howell has been all over the map. I thought the Commanders were going to be around 500 this season, and maybe have a chance to sneak into the playoffs. Clearly, that's not going to be the case. Defensively, they sold off some pieces. They're going to get rolled, right? Dallas is at home. Dallas at home as a favorite destroys bad teams. What do you think?
They're not going to get rolled.
They're not going to get rolled. Okay.
No. Washington has Dallas's number when they play them. I'm not saying that Washington wins the game. I guarantee you they're competitive in this football game. You forget last year Washington beat the snot out of Dallas the last week of the season. They constantly play Dallas hard. You think about a couple years ago when Colt McCoy went into Dallas and won that football game. Washington, for whatever reason, it's like styles make fights. The Giants always play the Commanders way harder than they should, and the Commanders always play the Cowboys way tougher than they should. This is a rivalry game. These teams know each other and hate each other, and I promise you Washington does not fold in this game.
I mean, Mo, at their best, we've seen Washington hang with the Eagles this season. They didn't win those games, but they were definitely competitive, and the Eagles are a better team than the Cowboys are. What do you like? Do you see an upset here, or is it just going to be a close game where the Cowboys win it?
I think it's a close game and the Cowboys win it. It wouldn't shock me if Sam Howell threw for 2 or 3 touchdown passes and has a big game.
Now, Gene, coming out of this, those Cowboys are going to be 8-3, and you're going to be hearing it. How about them Cowboys 8-3?
Listen, Cowboys fans, and it's funny. I don't like bringing up other shows, but Skip Bayless had a conversation recently with Keyshawn Johnson and Richard Sherman about how the Cowboys are a much better team than the Eagles. And he's like, what about 7-3 makes you feel like that's better than 9-1?
Right. And what about 8-3 is going to be better than 10-1? So I don't know. Gentlemen, last game on the docket for Thanksgiving, probably going to be the best game of the docket in general. The Niners and the Seahawks. Hopefully, Gene, Seattle can figure something out, because if they get rolled here, and they've been up and down, literally, good game, terrible game, their last few games. If they get rolled here, they can kiss probably the division goodbye, and then they're on the verge of not being in the playoff conversation if they can't figure stuff out with Geno Smith. They are playing at home. They have a couple of injuries, though. Who do you think is going to win this one?
They're going to get stomped. San Francisco's starting to hit their stride. I think San Francisco beats them by a ton. I don't think this is one of those games where you can turn it off at halftime. I think San Francisco absolutely blows the doors off Seattle this week. I think that the addition of Chase Young has given them—
He's been a beast.
Oh, my God. Him and Nick Bosa coming from both ends. I don't think Seattle has the offensive line to be able to hold that. Brock Purdy is looking back better than ever with now that Debo and Trent and Brandon Ayuk and CMC are all on the field together. I like the 49ers big.
Mo, we're assuming you like the Niners here.
I do, and I hope Gene's right. I do. I'm only saying that because for whatever reason, Seattle always plays the Niners hard. They just do, and it's one of those games that they'll get up for. And just when people are like, well, Geno looks kind of like old Geno, he'll play the Niners and Geno will throw for 300 yards. So I think the Niners will win. I just don't think it's going to be a blowout.
All right, Gene, before we close out the show, we've asked everyone this week, we're going to ask you as well, what's your favorite Thanksgiving side, sir?
You might laugh, but I love me some baked beans.
Okay.
No, I'm with that. I'm all about that. See, Gene's, that's what I'm talking about. Give me the baked beans, cornbread on the side. I can do some things.
100%.
All right,
Dip
Mo.
the cornbread and the baked bean sauce.
Yes. See, Gene knows. He knows.
Mo, close us out, sir.
Hey, appreciate the support. Check out all the great content that we have on Sports Empire Network. Check out the Empire.
Hey, we won't be here tomorrow because we got Thanksgiving sides to eat, but we'll be back on Friday breaking down everything that happened on the Thanksgiving days, previewing the Black Friday matchup with the Dolphins and the Jets, and previewing everything else that's going to happen in Week 12 of the NFL season. Make sure you are here for that. We will see you Friday morning on Coffee and Sports here on Sports Empire Network.
I mean, you can see right now, without LeBron, Lakers are struggling.
Let me tell you about a team I hate, all right? I know the Dallas Cowboys fan is here, so I had to make sure he knew how much I hate this team.
I'm ready. I've often said that the people who run baseball, they try very hard to ruin it.
I'm from Brooklyn. I don't have a problem saying it to his face.
Oh, I'm from Brooklyn.
Hey, you guys any